Okay. So Jamna, we may have a few other people joining us soon, but in the meantime, I think we can start. Does that work for
Oh,
you?
yeah, that's fine with me.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Oh, now we can see Syed. Hi,
That's right.
Syed. Good to see you. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you on the other side of the world. I'm here in Canada, so it's still very early in the morning for me. But we have people attending and typically joining from all sides of the world. So I know Jamna is joining us from Dubai today, so it's evening for her. Alevin from the Philippines. Syed, if you can just type it in where you are joining us from, that would be awesome as well. But thank you for all of you to be here. Germany, that's awesome.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Germany. Wow.
So the topic for today. So first of all, my name is Bruno Freitas. I'm the CEO and founder of JBF Consulting. We provide PMO consulting service to many organizations across Canada, mostly when it comes to project management maturity or project PMO establishment. Sometimes project management delivery as well, smart sheet implementation, training, coaching. It's everything about project management and PMOs. That's our niche. And I typically have these conversations on a monthly basis with PMO leaders across the world. Because I really enjoy this opportunity to exchange ideas with the community. And I was talking to Jamna a few weeks ago, and she was telling me about all the great work she's doing in her organization. And very interestingly, we're talking about innovation, right? Which is something that is very challenging for most PMOs. Jamna, we see PMOs talking about, yeah, we have new products, we have innovation, but when it comes to applying that project management discipline or that consistency, it's a little bit more tricky for innovation portfolios, right? Because for innovative projects, you never know what the outcome is going to be, right? If your project might be a big success or your innovation might be a big failure, right? Which is okay as well,
Yeah.
because you would expect that from a innovative project, right? But your typical portfolio is likely different, right? You are looking for revenue growth, or you're looking for customer satisfaction, or something like that. So it's a little bit more predictable, right? And innovative or innovation projects I found a little bit more challenging, because you have to pitch the idea, you have to sell it, but the company has to be somewhat okay if that project fails, right? Which is something tricky. So I'm very interested in hearing your experience and your perspective today. But Jenna, before I jump into the questions here, right, I would love to ask you to introduce yourself. I could do that, but I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to really explain everything that you have done in your career and what you do today. So I guess I'll pass just over to you.
Thanks, Bruno. Firstly, I want to thank you for this opportunity, because, really excited, because this framework and this ecosystem which we are going to discuss is something that I developed to meet the needs of my organization to deliver those innovations and experimentations. And it did lead to an award-winning product, which later ultimately helped me in my promotion to head of PMO. So quite close to my heart, the whole topic. And so now going to the intro about me. So I'm a passionate project management professional based in Dubai, and I'm a software engineer by education. So started my career as a software engineer in India, then moved to Dubai, took the path of software engineering, then IT project management, then business project management, then PMO services across diverse industry domains. I've been in shipping, education, and events and media, so multiple domains. And also I have delivered projects not just in Middle East, but also in Asia and Europe. And in the last few years, I've been quite focused on innovations and global PMO functions. And at British Council, which is my current organization, I joined as a program manager to deliver innovations. And as I mentioned, one of the project became quite successful. was launched globally and it won an award, and that led to my promotion as head of PMO. Currently, I'm assigned to deliver that framework and use that framework to deliver innovations across 3 portfolios. And I've got a 14-member team supporting me in different functions. That would support the product development or support the innovation development across these portfolios. And I'm also PMP certified, PGMP certified, Scrum Master, and Scaled Agile certified. And I've done some MIT courses in AI because that's my current focus area. And so that's kind of like a short summary of my experience and education. Additionally, I'm also a volunteer in PMI UAE chapter. I currently serve as the director of governance at the chapter. I've been volunteering from 2018. And I'm part of other communities, other AI communities. I'm a delegate to the Global Alliance in Artificial Intelligence, and also a volunteer in Women in AI UAE chapter in Dubai, as well as Dubai AI community. So part of like good number of communities at the moment. So that's the short summary.
That's awesome. You are very much involved with PMI, and you have a number of PMI certifications as well. So that's impressive.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So Jamna, I'll ask you a few questions, right? Because I'm very interested in your background, right? And especially you mentioned that you work in early days of your career as a program manager, project manager, right? So you had that mandate of delivering projects, right? To delivering programs. And then you are, as the head of PMO, I understand that your portfolios, they have that mix of new products and the delivery of existing products as well. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yeah, it has.
Okay. So before you joined the British Council, right, the organization that you work for today, did you have experience working on innovation projects as well, or is this your first time?
No, it was mostly on digital transformations that I was working on. Just before joining British Council, yes, I was working on a natural language processing project, which was to provide customer support. I worked in Infosys in between. So that is a IT services company, and we were working on an application that would provide a chat AI support for an organization. But that was for a brief moment, not to the extent that I worked on innovations within British Council. So I would say solid experience I had. I actually got it in British Council in terms of delivering innovations.
Okay. So when you joined British Council, was the mandate was already to work on innovation projects as well?
Yes, so that was an advantage for me. So I was actually recruited as a program manager to deliver this new products using AI, AR, and VR. So innovative products into the market within the education space. So that was my role and my assignment actually. So that really helped in actually setting up the framework over there. Yeah.
Okay. So Jen, I guess I will ask you now. And friends, for those of you attending the call today, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question for Gemna, or just type in the chat here, and we'll make sure that your questions are asked, because this is a very interesting topic, and I do have too many questions. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions as well. So tell me more about the innovation projects, right? Because for us, for let's say traditional PMs or program managers, right? We have that mandate that this is the scope, and we are going to the timelines, the costs, these are the resources I'm going to need, and I'm going to deliver, right? Of course, you may have some agile/iterative projects that you do things in a more evolutionary fashion, right? But it's more predictable at the end of the day. You kind of know what is the business outcome that you want to achieve, right? Whereas with innovation projects, it's a little bit less consistent, I would say, right? It's things are a little bit more fuzzy at the beginning, at least, right? So how is that for you, right? How did you shift your mindset from something that this is what I need to achieve, to something that I'm not so clear on? I have to figure this thing out, right?
Yeah.
What to do here?
Yeah. See, when I joined the BC as a program manager, they gave me this list of ideas. So they had run ideation workshops by then, and they gave me this list of ideas which were to deliver, either as experiment or deliver a full product launch. And these ideas had this untested technology like, AR, AI, AR, and VR, as well as that involved pioneering products. Like we had no such products in the market. So neither competitors has released, neither internally British Council had released any similar products in the past. And also, I had to take care about the regulations in the countries where the such products will have to be delivered. So the way it happens in British Council is the ideas would be generated from one country in a region, but then since British Council is global, then we have to deliver it across. We have to come up with a global solution for that and deliver it across globally. Which then I'm talking about almost 80 countries where British Council is having a presence. So, since I did not have so much of experience delivering innovation prior to that, a practical experience, I'd read about it, but didn't have a practical experience about it. I learned the hard way. So, I did try to apply the traditional model into the whole picture. It didn't work. After a few weeks, I ended up having all the conflicts with my business team. So it, it had to go through that route. And that's when I started looking into it deeply and then realized that what we need here is a model that would enable risk taking, that will enable experimentations, and that would enable iterative validation of the customer assumptions. But at the same time, we also have to ensure that this particular product would deliver an ROI that is aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization, right? So it had to be learned through that way. And then I started creating a model where we blended agility with structure. We integrated design thinking to ensure a customer-driven solution is made. And then we integrated lean startup principles to ensure a faster learning so that we can move with speed at the same time with structure. So that's where I actually started off with looking into the models. It had to be learned through the hard way by applying something wrong and then having the issues and then applying something new.
And that's awesome. So I want to definitely ask you more questions about the project management techniques or frameworks that you are using, right? Or the things that you research. But one thing that I wanted to ask you first is about perhaps the cultural adaptation or even your mindset change as well. Because as I was saying at the beginning, right, for an innovation project, an outcome might be, yeah, it didn't work, right? It failed, right?
Yeah.
Project managers, right? We treat those projects as babies, right? We want them to be successful, right? Portfolios and all that, right? So a project failing, typically it hurts us, right? It's not something that we want to see. So how did you perhaps change your mindset to make sure that you are comfortable with failure? And how did you do that across the organization as well? Because I'm sure that some stakeholders, they might not be as comfortable with failures as well, right? So how did you convince them that failure is possible and it is okay?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, when I started off, I was brought into this team that had the startup culture. So, there it was easy to set up that particular mindset because the whole idea was to have some learning. So, we have some ideas, we test it out, we gather some learnings. As long as we gather learnings, whether we are not going forward with the idea or whether we are going forward with the idea, it is a success. That's how we defined success within that particular, I would say, startup ecosystem in that particular department. But when I had to take that model and put it into three other portfolios where they were used to delivering normal projects, compliance related projects or product upgrades, this was something new to them. So there I had to, when I had to put it across this particular model that would iterate and experiment, and you would expect some money, not to the investment, not to generate an ROI, but only generate a learning. I had to show them with an example of all the previous innovations that failed and the amount that had gone into it, and they had experience of that. So in British Council, we are into lots of innovations because we need to come up with new ideas to attract the customer. This is a field. The education is a field where there's just lots of competitions, lots of innovations happening. So to keep up with the market is very important. We innovate regularly, even on the existing products. So The ones that did not go through such iterations, they just take up the idea, implement it, not probably applying agile, not probably applying design thinking. There were instances of those projects failing in the sense that not returning the targeted income that they expected or not generating an ROI as they expected. So to implement over there or to set the idea over there, it was just showing them the money and then presenting an iterative option to them wherein we are talking about you need the spending would depend upon each phase. Like if each phase you have a success, you have enough data that indicates that the idea is going to be viable or feasible or desirable, only then you move to the next phase, only then you release the funding for the next phase. So where the senior stakeholders would have better control of the system, at the same time better control of the funding as well. So showing them that advantages of having a new model being built, which is not based on a checklist based kind of a model, which is the traditional PMO model, where you're not looking at only the scope, cost, and the timelines and the fixed benefits, but somewhere you have to experiment and try out and target to have an innovation that works really well. That is what then I try to convince them about.
That's excellent. So you are basically breaking down the ideas in small pilots, right? And you are trying to prove that in that little pilot that is controlled is just for a small period of time as well. How long does typically these pilots take? It's a few months or a few weeks?
Yeah, we try to do it. I mean, it depends upon the kind of innovation that we do. So I'll just give you a brief around what is the kind of framework that I did. So I'll just explain the whole framework which I actually implemented to handle the innovations there. And these innovations, I mean, these ideas, as I said, had huge amount of assumptions around viability, desirability, and feasibility. We didn't know whether it would work. We didn't know whether it would generate an ROI globally. And we didn't know if it's technically feasible because we're thinking about the pioneering products. So the framework that I put in place obviously had gates, just like a traditional PMO model. But within those gates, we were not looking at a checklist to whether these documents were delivered. What we were looking were whether, in every iteration, we were looking for that data that would validate that the product would be viable, feasible, and desirable. So that is one aspect of that framework. The second aspect is I did come up with a typical workflow that can be utilized, a long workflow that can be utilized for a quite high complex innovations where there are lots of assumptions to be validated. So I'll just take you through those checkpoints. So we had an idea checkpoint wherein we are looking at the idea and strategic fit. So somebody comes up with the idea, the initial evaluation is whether this actually fits into the strategic objectives of that portfolio. The next checkpoint would be a value proposition. So we collected customer insights. We did market research from the few countries within the regions and try to understand the pain points, the customer gain points, and created a value proposition that would work for that. The next checkpoint was to create a proof of concept. So that is basically to test the value proposition and collect the data that would help you make a stronger business case. So till now, you can see I've not talked about the business case. So that first few iterations, we had to have some, I call it as innovation reserve to experiment. So this is the area where things may not go well and we decide to stop the project. So, but that is like the money that is spent mainly to gather the learnings. So that is innovation reserve taken from an innovation fund. So the moment we do the POC validation, we collect enough data to create a business case. That's when the real, we start looking at the overall budget that is required, the timeline that might be required based on whatever learnings we had till then. So we work with the finance, come up with this, PNL, potential PNL, as much as possible. We come up with whatever we can define around viability, desirability, and feasibility at that point. We come up with technical solution, cost, how much timeline it could take during that business case. Once the business case is validated, you get the funding for the remaining of the phases. And we would ask for the funding approval, but you receive the approval, but you do not exactly receive the funding, the full funding for the rest of the phases. But you will receive the funding for the next phase, which is the prototype development and testing it out. And that's where you gather further learning around your product feasibility and desirability, because you actually work with a good number of customers within the regions to understand it better. From there, you move on to the MVP readiness check, I would call. That is where you would have an upgraded version of your prototype, would test it. You would have your go-to-market strategy. I also instituted to have a transition plan to the team that would take over the responsibility to sustain the benefits or to gather the ROI, because these products were going out to the different markets where the local markets were responsible to meet the sales targets. So that's benefit sustainment. There was a central team that would take over the products. And then you would move to a MVP validation global readiness check. So altogether, there was a 7 checkpoint that I came up with. No, that's the longest checkpoint, depending upon and the number of checkpoints would actually depend upon the complexity of the product. Would depend upon how much you want to validate. So, but every checkpoint, we had a cross-functional governance body. So we had representatives from like legal, finance, marketing, tech, products, business, who were evaluating what we were present in each of those phases, which was mainly the data in the form of success criteria or the targets that we were saying, okay, we met this target, it indicates this much of viability is there, this much of desirability is there, is this much of feasibility is there. So this governance body ensured that we are in the right direction. They helped us remove the blockers. They would insist to stop the project if they realize that, okay, this is not going in the right direction, this is not viable. They would push forward the project with more support if they realize that, okay, this is going to generate good ROI. And this probably is quite important at this time of for this market or this customer segment. So that was the third aspect that we had, the cross-functional governance body, which was put in place to help us in this evaluation of these gates. And the last thing was to ensure I would say, retrospective culture. So I insisted that every phase, every iteration had a internal retrospective wherein we had the learnings documented, and that's taken to the next phase to ensure we have more or increase the probability of the success of the MVP. So that's how and our entire target was always to ensure data collection to validate the viability and the feasibility and desirability, and to increase the probability of success of your MVP launch into the global markets.
That's awesome.
So that's a summary of the framework, I would say.
Well, thanks for breaking down for us. As you were talking, my mind was just running or speeding here because all sorts of other questions that I didn't have think about it initially just came to my mind, and I certainly
I know. Because we are talking about, I mean, the reason why I had to come up with such a framework is because we are talking about millions being put into it. It's not smaller amounts. At the initial phase, before that business case is put in place, yes, it's that innovation research, which again we insisted have to be a very small pot, because we wanted to ensure there were ways to test this out, the viability and the feasibility, with a limited investment and within limited time. There was insistence on doing it fast. So we also used strategizer tools. So the team was actually trained on strategizer tools, if you have heard of it, that is used in business modeling and value proposition. Very, very useful tools to map those customer pain points and gain points into proper value proposition, come up with a business model that works. So it's at initial stages, yes, limited investment, but post that, actually, I mean, that initial stages we looked at, we were quite flexible in the kind of metrics we were using. We were looking more at the learning metrics, that ensured that, okay, we had enough learning. But in the second part of the framework, which is from the time that you actually execute, you go into the prototype development, you start spending money. We went back into the traditional metrics where we started looking into the variance with the schedule, the variance with the budget, because then we had to have a control. Because what I committed to them was, yes, we are doing an innovation, but still with a bit of a control. It's an agile with a structure so that you have the control on that. And we had to, many of the ideas, sorry, I was cutting you off. Many of the ideas we were raising against the competitors because the competitors were also working on it. So in terms of the timeline as well, we had to move faster.
Yes. Now that's interesting. So once again, friends, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or just type them into the chat box. Otherwise, I will dominate here and ask all my questions because my mind is just racing right now. So Jamna, two questions that I want to ask, right? One is about the business case. So most organizations, right, some of them, they don't even bother about putting together a business case, which is a problem altogether, right? And some organizations, they put together a business case, perhaps not for all projects, but let's say they put business case together for projects. and but they don't want to spend a lot of money or a lot of time on those business cases, right? So typically, just a couple people working together to put the business case, and they don't have the time or perhaps the a budget or a team to support them in a structured way, as you were explaining, right? And I think that's the right thing, to make sure that your business case are solid business case, right? And you are somewhat accurate in terms of how much this thing is going to cost, or what is the business outcome that we are going to achieve, and all those things. So I want to ask you, if you have made just a comparison between the actual data from your project delivery versus the business case, right? Are you typically within the budget and the timelines that you had in the business case, or have you seen variances because of the innovative nature of those projects?
So few projects, there were variances where we had like lots of assumptions. And actually, that gave me, I mean, when I started off, yes, it was coming up with lots of variances because, again, lots of uncertainty were there. We didn't even know what tech we could use. We didn't even know whether the partners were out there. But as we moved forward, there was so much of learnings that we used to calculate the risk buffers in the case of innovation. So right now, I have got like certain learnings which I've shared with my PMs, and I make sure when I evaluate their budget estimations, I make sure there is enough risk buffer put in there. And these are, I'm talking about like huge risk buffers put at that stage, because if I have to take the example of this particular award-winning product, again, it was a multi-million pound. I was fortunate in putting a budget that included lots of things. I mean, we talked to lots of customers, assumed lots of scope to be included within that. But at the end, half of the scope was removed, but new things came in, which we hadn't anticipated. But the way the buffers were put in, we managed to meet the initial budget that was committed in the business case. And there was a control. I mean, since I committed on that budget, then certain features did not get in, which indicated that, okay, it's not going to generate an additional ROI. So once we committed to it, then we try to keep to that, but at the same time ensuring that we're still aligned to generate the ROI, which is a strategical objective. So it is more about once you decide, then you try to control it. But this is something that you have to expect, because when I presented the business case, I did mention these are the list of assumptions we have taken. Now, it could work, it may not work. We are assuming that these partners are there to deliver as, let's say, platform solution or AI solution, and the AI solution could take like 3 months. We didn't know how much time it would take because nobody had done that. So it was clearly mentioned in the business case, okay, this could go beyond this timeline, this could go beyond this budget. So the thresholds that was agreed with the governance body was a bit higher percentage rather than the usual ones like plus or minus 5%. This was more than that. So that's how, like, I mean, we had to explain to them that this is different from a normal project because we are working with lots of uncertainties. So in that context, yes, I mean, they were kind of like, I mean, we managed to convince them that this could go beyond a committed timeline and budget. But then right now, and back then as well, my intention and the effort was actually to have a control on that scope and the timelines. And we kind of like controlled, if we had to keep the budget controlled or if we had to keep the timeline controlled, depending upon which one we had to keep the control, like in the normal traditional project, we played with the scope as well. So it's that initial areas, yes. As I mentioned, during the discovery phases, before that the POC is done, during the market research, it just can take lots of time. I did not put a schedule against those activities. It's after that a schedule is put, and then we try to meet that schedule.
Okay, that's awesome. The other question that I have for you is about the checkpoints that you mentioned, right? You have 7 checkpoints, if I'm not mistaken, right? Are those the same as your, let's say, stage gates? Because stage gates in several organizations are more compliance, right? The PMO is
yeah.
Okay. Now you have the project shorted, great. You have a project schedule, awesome, right? But it's arguably the value of those stage gates might not be there, right? It's mostly for compliance, right? And what I understood from your explanation so far that this is more dynamic, right? And it's cross-functional as well. So you have people from different parts of the organization. So are you looking at compliance in those meetings, or what is the focus of those meetings?
Yeah. So yes, these are the stage gates, but as you would have assumed, we are not looking at the compliance in that meetings. None of the innovation projects we deliver the program charter for approval. It's delivered for alignment to make sure everyone understands what are the objectives we are trying to achieve, what are the, what could be those benefits we are trying to achieve. It is not sent for review and approval. That's sent for, I mean, to be as a head of PMO, I would look into it, have an oversight. So in those stage gates within an innovation development, what they are looking for is basically the data evidence. So again, one thing that I missed to mention is the business cases here are not extensive business cases that you would normally see. Max that we had time to present was 15 minutes for a business case. That's what we put in place. So you're talking about like 4 slides because again, as I said, we had lots of innovations and we wanted to bring the culture of not looking at those checklists or the checkpoints, rather enabling the teams to collect the data that would show that it is viable, desirable, and feasible, and enabling the governance body to use the data to make those decisions to stop the project or push forward the project. So the focus was on training the teams to understand what data to collect, how to collect it. I put forward the system of converting that evidence into a success criteria and targets that is agreed with the governance body as well as with your program team and your product team. So that, I mean, initially, yes, there were no success criteria. It again, I learned through the hard way. Initially, there was this confusions about, the team would be presenting some evidence. The governance body would agree, no, that evidence doesn't mean that it is viable. But the team would say, no, it is viable based on this evidence. So then I insisted on setting up the success criteria and the targets. But again, the targets are not working like a checklist. There could be that some of the targets are not met. But if there are learnings within that phase, and the governance body is convinced that that learning can be utilized to upgrade the product to meet or to meet that viability or meet that feasibility requirements or desirability, they were allowed to move to the next phase. So the whole focus was on learnings and insights for each phase. Accordingly, they used to take the decision to move forward or to stop the project. So no checklist. So in completely different from that compliance-based stage gates.
Wow, that's very different than your traditional.
Yes, very, very different. But I
Alignment.
had to bring that traditional flavor in the format of the success criteria and targets. Only again, I learned through the hard way. There were projects wherein it just didn't get aligned. And the teams were not sure what they were looking for. And the governance body was not sure, okay, what does this mean? So there was no that alignment in terms of an understanding of what it means by viable or feasible or desirable. So beforehand a phase, they would agree with the governance body, okay, these are the success criteria and these are the targets we are trying to achieve. If we achieve that, it proves that this is viable, it's on track with the generation of ROI as we committed.
That's awesome. So you start with the end in mind, right? This is what we want.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's certainly very different. Okay, I do have more questions, but I can see there is a question here from Priya. What tools or platforms have you found most effective for tracking value and learning instead of traditional milestones? Are you using a different platform, a different tool to track value, or is the same PPM tools?
The normal PM tools. I mean, we didn't use any very specific tools for this. It is all around how to use the data for decision making, how to evaluate the data that indicates that it is viable and feasible and desirable. For example, I'll say if to identify the product is desirable by the customer, we were looking at when we were testing, for example, the prototype, we were looking at the number of people or the adoption rate. We did surveys with the customers to calculate the NPS scores. So again, the prototypes, it could go around prototype 1 and prototype 2. If the prototype 1 was not releasing or coming up with the right scores, then we moved to the prototype 2. So the kind of metrics that we used were this to come up with the customer value or customer desirability. When it came to viability, we worked on the business case, as I said. That means we worked on the P&L, we looked at NPVs scores, and we looked at the payback period, EBITDA values. We worked quite strongly with the finance team. Again, we were talking about multi-million pound investment, wherein we were expecting a good high profitability. So that was the values we were looking at. Obviously, during the prototype or during the MVP, it's not generating as much as income. Again, it was very important that I put that success criteria and the targets over there to make sure that people understand, okay, we are just delivering the MVP. Don't expect that, a major portion of that customer segment is going to use that product. we are expecting only this much portion of the customer segment to use that product. So to show them that month by month, the targets was also an kind of like a tool that we put in place. So we had this, I mean, if I have to say what tools we used, I would say tracking of the success criteria, tracking of these benefits. So when I moved at the last stage, when we are moving the benefit sustainment plan to the team who would take over the benefits, we put in place kind of like a monthly targets in terms of ROI for that particular product, so that it shows that it's not gonna go just like that. I mean, in the first month you're not gonna get the full customer segment. It's gonna go slow. So that is, I mean, that those were the tools that we basically used to make sure everyone is aligned on what is to be expected and how much time it would take for that product to actually be profitable. So it was more around playing around PNL and the customer surveys, getting those NPS scores that we used.
Okay, so thank you for that. I was paying attention to everything that you were just talking about, right? And you are always talking about business outcome and business value. You are talking about profitability, ROI, NPS, customer satisfaction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't seen you mentioning about the traditional project metrics at any point yet, right? Like, oh, we need to deliver these many projects on time. We need to deliver these many projects on budget, right? On schedule. Those things that many PMOs still track, right? They don't track the business outcomes the way you are describing. It's more, this traditional project management metrics, as I was saying, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
track this project management, these traditional project management metrics as well, or you don't really pay attention to those?
So we don't have a metric that looks at the number of projects. So the way we do over there is we have a portfolio metrics. The portfolio KPIs would be there, which is normally in terms of the customer acquisition, the profitability, the customer retentions, again, NPS scores. So which are aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization. And every program has KPIs. Every innovation programs, whether it's a new product or a product upgrades with new features added to the product, those KPIs are aligned to the portfolio KPIs. So that would be multiple programs would be contributing to that. Let's say the customer acquisition KPIs or customer retention KPIs, basically the income KPIs. So we don't look at the number of projects. Instead, we look at what is that ROI generated from the programs. So one of the metrics that we actually look at the portfolio level is MVP success rates, because for us to generate that ROI or to meet the target ROI that would contribute to the portfolio KPIs, we need to ensure the MVPs that we are doing is successful. So yes, and we need to ensure those that are not successful are killed as early as possible, so that we can redirect the resources, whether it's budget or the human resources, into the ones that will be successful. So yeah, I mean, we did not look at those traditional ones, but yes, we are still managing to track this, the schedule variance, the budget variance, but more around, like in the schedule variance, we don't look at the in-between milestones at all. The only one that we look at is a target launch date. And we give them a timeline flexibility of around, okay, if they're planning, let's say in 26, 27 Q1 financial year, we would allow them to move until the Q2, provided, we are not fighting against a competitor who's going to pick up the market in that particular quarter, and we have to make sure to deliver in that quarter. But otherwise, these are, I mean, again, I'm talking about the innovation projects. The other ones have their own, we use a traditional way of managing it. But in the case of the innovation projects, this is how we manage. We look at MVP success rates, we look at business case approval rates, and obviously the budget variance mostly, schedule variance with lots of plus or minus thresholds. So
that's very interesting. It's very different than
very different. Yes, it took some time for me to come up with all of this because I was coming from that traditional PMO. So as I said, the learnings that I had been like really, really valuable. And now I'm at a stage where I really understand how innovations work and how this framework is helping to deliver more innovations successfully, launching more successfully. And we even have, we also look at the metrics. I would say I have got this like 3 set of metrics for every programs. I've got program metrics, this program management metrics looking at schedule and the budget. Then there is a benefit metrics, which is looking at the KPIs that would contribute to the portfolio KPIs, which I mentioned as like the ROIs, the profitability. Then I have got a change metrics as well, because when I started off, I realized first few projects, the innovations, yes, we launched. After that, it's not scaling. No, it's very difficult. The part where it fails was a change management side. You're delivering some new product into the market. Your operations team should know how to handle that new product. The operations team should know how to handle the customer queries about the new product. If they don't do it, the whole product will not generate the ROI as expected. And that was a critical area. So then I started putting the change metrics over there. So I know the way I mean, capturing the feedback from the teams that were impacted by this new product, capturing their again NPS scores from them in terms of their understanding of promoting this product, as well as how the training was done. Did they understand the change? So overall change management metrics were taken, and that also we would look at the adoption rate. I mean, adoption rate also was part of the change metrics. So yes, again, it's a different set of metrics we were looking at the innovation.
That's very interesting. And I want to talk a little bit about benefits realization, right? Because you mentioned that a couple times now. So you mentioned that after the projects are done, you are concerned about or you focus on ROIs, right, for those products.
Yeah.
That, right? But for most PMOs, this is kind of a data point or information that the PMOs don't manage themselves, right? So this is typically done by other business departments or finance, somewhere else, right? So how is your PMO engaged in that process to make sure that yes, we complete this project, we finish this new product, and then 6 months later, we achieved the ROI that we thought for those projects, or we haven't achieved, and let's use that as an input to better our intake process for the next product, right? So does your PMO still get engaged on the benefits realization? How does that work for you?
Again, initially it was not. Then we realized, yeah, it was not delivered. We were not able to sustain the benefits that we actually targeted. So then we came up with this functionality of the PMO who would actually, I mean, before the project is handed over, we had this benefit sustainment plan and a benefit tracker wherein we had put targets across a certain period of time. Again, depending upon the product and how much time it would take to reach that particular pinnacle in terms of ROI. So now we have put in a function within the PMO to track this, to work with the operations team to capture this data. So mainly around the operations team within the PMO, who's working on the finance side to capture this income, or it depends. It can be NPS scores or it can be income KPIs to capture for each of those regions where the product is being delivered. And we have owners for each of those benefits as well, depending upon the benefit, to who is accountable to ensure to reach those targets. And this particular benefit reporting would go into the governance body. So we had put some, again, kind of like a 3-month gate that they have to report these benefits along with the actuals against those targets into the governance body. And if it is not on track, they have to come up with an action plan to reach those targets in the next months. So yes, the PMO function, I mean, my learning was that the PMO function should be involved in the tracking of the benefits, and we should put within the structure the reporting of those benefits for a certain period of time, which is agreed with the governance body.
Okay, but the accountability is on the business, right? It's not on the
accountability PMO. Is on the business. Yes, yeah. It's more about the reporting and the action planning around if they are not meeting the targets is also with the business, but with the global PMO team supporting them.
That's awesome. Okay, so I do have another question here from Priya. How do you get leadership to see early learnings from an MVP as real progress, even when there is no revenue or big numbers to show yet? How can you make them comfortable with the progress of the MVP?
Yeah. I mean, again, as I said, we had lots of experience of failed innovations, and you're again talking about like multi-million pounds of money going down the drain, because they would have done those innovations without actually doing an MVP validations or prototype validations or POCs being done. I was just looking into, as part of preparing for this webinar, I looked into some reports. So look, maybe I'll just ask you, can you guess the percentage of AI projects that are not generating ROI? And there's a report that came out of Gartner quite recently. So they had a global report done on this, the percentage of AI projects that are generating ROI and not generating ROI. So can you guess
So
how much are not generating ROI?
not generating ROI, I would guess 95%. Is that a high
Oh
number?
yeah, okay. Yeah, you went into the higher number. Okay, the number that came out was 85%. I was
Oh,
surprised by it.
yeah.
85% of these AI projects are not generating the ROI. So, I mean, you're talking about probably trillions of investment that is going into R&D, and still they are not ensuring that these projects are generating the ROI in alignment to the strategic objectives. I mean, they would start off AI projects just for the sake of doing the AI projects, right? So, when I mean the we show them the advantage of using MVP. I mean, again, you will have to the way that, and I would suggest that people to do it in their organizations is to run a pilot, like to run use a framework like this. So it can be customized based on your situation of the organization, the domain that you're working in. But run a pilot that would go through iterations, that would go through MVP, but put in all your effort to ensure that MVP is successful, that those iterations should contribute to a successful MVP. Now, I face this challenge when I actually joined as a head of PMO in a different department, and when I had to take care of the portfolio, there was a situation of a MVP failure fatigue. There was so much of MVPs put out in the market, and the country teams were like, we don't want any more MVP. Because for them, even the communication part of things like, the MVP is an MVP. It's testing the market. We are not putting out a fully completed project, a fully completed product, did not go out to them. But they delivered to the customers and came back with negative feedback. So what I push forward in the organization is that have iterations before the MVP, so you don't start with the MVP, and try to make your MVP as much as successful. Gather the insights before that to make sure the MVP is successful. Of course, there can be MVP failures as well, but you need to show to the management what is the impact of not having such an iterative approach to develop these innovations. And I believe most of the organizations would have gone through such failures, at least one of them, and have seen the money going down the drain where they just do it without an iterative approach to it or without using agile or design thinking to it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Gemma, we only have a few minutes left, but I do have another question here from Syed. First of all, he loved your explanation about the innovation framework. He said he's from construction, so more a waterfall background, but
Yeah.
it was easy to follow. So he has an interesting question about does innovation also prevails at the level of user stories, or do you just pick them up from the early ideation sessions which were conducted before? So, Syed, please join me here if I'm saying something that you didn't mean. But I think he's trying to understand if you manage these innovation projects more as agile projects with user stories, or you following a more traditional waterfall approach with requirements and things like that.
We follow a hybrid project management model.
Okay.
Of course, the internal, like as I said, I mean, these innovations are very large scale that what I have done. It involves it's a huge programs actually with lots of projects inside that. And mostly, yes, we follow Agile, we follow Scrum, we put the user stories. It is hybrid model, not, I wouldn't say it is a waterfall model. I mean, it has to be iterative, so it internally as well, each of those projects are done iteratively as well. Again, we do not know the solutions. We do not know whether the solutions would work. So we have to ensure that it's done in agile. Mostly we use Scrum frameworks. That's what we used over in British Council. So we had like Scrum of Scrums. So in terms of if the question is what is the framework that is used, it's agile. Now innovations, it's the source of the innovations. Partly it can be from the ideation workshops, which we do not so regularly, but when we think that we have to do and we have to revamp a portfolio is when we do an ideation workshop. But otherwise, those projects which are already in BAU and we are regularly doing the maintenance, meeting the change or resolving the change request or resolving the issues. the innovative ideas sometimes come from that. So we would have customers raising something, or even we would have the product team identifying something based on the issues that they had seen. And that might, let's say, that might require an AI solution to implement, and that would completely improve the efficiency of the project. Again, it's innovation because we might not have done it earlier, we might not have seen the solution, but that can also be a source of innovative ideas, which in that case, if it turns out to be a major upgrade, again, I put it back to the framework. I would ask them to use this framework, start with an idea, go through an ideation model, make sure it's strategic fit. Again, we use strategizer templates for that. We have a very simple ideation template for that. Then go through a value proposition, go through the entire cycle. If it is a major upgrade, that requires iteration to validate the assumptions around viability. If it is a minor one, then it would just be back in your agile Jira, and then it becomes a user story and gets implemented. So it depends upon the complexity, and the route that it takes. But the sources are many in terms of innovation ideas.
Awesome. Yeah, Priya and Syed were quite pleased with your answer. Thanks for that. So, Jen, I do have one final question for you. You mentioned that this was a journey, right?
Yeah.
You designed this, but you didn't get right from day one, right? You learned as you went through it, right? So for some of us who are just starting, or we want to introduce this in our organizations, right? What advice do you give to us?
Yeah. So let's assume that we have got PMs who are already handling the traditional PMOs, supporting portfolios. The first thing, I mean, from my learning, the first thing that you would need is an innovation reserve that is agreed with your senior management. So this is a reserve pot that you would use for experimentations. We are not committing that this experimentations will result in an ROI. This experimentation would result in a learning. So it can may not be utilized to contribute to your strategic objectives, but it can generate learning. And that need not be a huge amount. Let's say if you have a product development fund, it can be 5 to 10% of that to use as innovation reserve to handle these experimentations. The second thing I would suggest is see if you can come up with like a medium complex idea, but with high visibility, wherein you can try out this iterative framework, but not taking long time, so that you can prove that how an iterative framework would end up in a successful MVP. Now, if you have such a, let's call it a lighthouse project, and it becomes successful, that will develop the trust in implementing an innovation framework over there. The third thing that you need is a cross-functional council. So from a traditional PMO council who would review the projects, you need a cross-functional body who is focusing on this learnings and data insights and not going through a checklist, not looking to approve a program plan, not looking to approve a detailed business case, but looking at the data from that business case to make decisions to move forward. If you already have a steerco in place for a portfolio, what you can do is, I mean, that consists of a cross-functional team. What you can do is set aside some, a certain portion of that meeting to handle these innovations. You need to treat innovation separately. I would suggest to have a separate dashboard for these innovative ideas. And because you need to have more information beyond what you would have in a traditional project. Something around like if it is a product, then you would have a product lifecycle stages put into it. So only to review those innovations, put aside some time in your steerco and explain to them what they need to look for. You will have to come up with this, you'll have to enable them, you'll have to support them in making decisions as well at the start. And the fourth thing is ensure that retrospectives are done. So the learnings are documented and you can take those learnings. So if you I missed one more. The fifth would be to ensure capability improvement. People who are into innovations, they need to have good business acumen. You need to have product thinking, agile and design thinking. I would suggest to invest in design thinking tools, trainings. And that capability improvement is very much required to handle innovations. The PMs can't just look at, as I had been talking only about the ROI, only because I understand the business very well. I had strong business acumen, and I'm making sure my PMs and PMOs coordinators, they're also having that understanding. So this would be the route that I can recommend to implement innovations in your organization.
That's awesome.
Does that answer? Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's lots of takeaways for us. But Jen, I could easily spend another hour at least asking you more questions, but I know it's late for you, so I'm not going to do that for you. Maybe we can have another session another day, because I certainly have way too many questions to ask you.
Okay.
Enjoying so much, and I hope everybody who joined us today enjoy as much as I did. But I want to thank you for your time, for sharing your experience, sharing your knowledge. This was very, very fascinating. And for those of you who joined us today, I'm sure that the questions were great. We learned quite a lot from all of you as well, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. So Jamna, once again, thank you for that. I have shared your LinkedIn profile with folks here on the call, so I hope you don't mind. You may get some connection requests, but
Yeah.
if it's all good
Happy
with
to
you.
connect.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
sure. Yeah, and thank you, Bruno, for this opportunity. It is actually I enjoyed talking about it and taking you through those stages, my learning stages, the hard way that I had to go through and then learn and implement this framework. But happy to share this knowledge with with the team, with people who have joined the session. And great questions. Thank you for asking those questions. Connect me in LinkedIn if you want to know more about this framework. I am planning to do more webinars about it in other communities as well. So yeah, I'll keep you posted. Just follow me in LinkedIn.
Yeah, let us know for sure. We want to learn more from you. Okay, so thanks everybody. Thanks Jamna
Thank
for
you.
time today. And this webinar has been recorded, so we're going to be putting our YouTube channel. You guys will see on my LinkedIn profile. So please feel free to follow me. We always have these webinars on a regular basis. The idea is to get the community together to talk about PMO stuff, right? Because there's a lot of project management forums out there, but we don't have as many channels for PMO leaders as well. So it's nice to be all together, have this opportunity to talk about things that matters to us as well. So thanks for joining today. Thanks again, Gemma, and everybody. Have an awesome day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.